The afternoon sun filtered through the massive glass ceiling of Riverside Mall, creating patterns of light and shadow across the polished floors. People moved in every direction, carrying shopping bags, pushing strollers, chatting on phones. It was a Tuesday, which meant the usual weekend chaos had settled into a more manageable rhythm. Store music mixed with conversations, creating that familiar hum of daily life. In the middle of this ordinary scene walked a woman who looked like she could be anyone. She wore faded jeans with a small coffee stain on one knee, white sneakers that had seen better days, and an oversized gray hoodie with the drawstrings pulled loose. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she had on a pair of thick-framed glasses that kept sliding down her nose. A canvas tote bag hung from her shoulder, stuffed with what looked like groceries and a worn paperback book. Her name was Victoria Chen, though nobody in that mall would have recognized her. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Victoria had been awake since 4 in the morning. Her flight from Vienna had landed at dawn, and instead of going straight to her hotel suite as her manager had planned, she'd asked the driver to drop her off 6 blocks away. She needed to walk. She needed to breathe. She needed to remember what it felt like to be nobody for just a few hours. For the past 8 months she'd been on tour. Concert halls in London, Paris, Tokyo, New York. Each performance sold out within minutes. Critics called her a genius, a once-in-a-generation talent. Her recordings had won awards. Her face appeared on magazine covers and billboards. But somewhere between the applause in the hotel rooms and the endless practice sessions, she'd started to feel like she was disappearing. She couldn't remember the last time she'd walked into a grocery store, or chosen her own clothes without someone suggesting what would photograph better, or sat at a piano without wondering if someone was judging every note. The mall had been an impulsive decision. She'd walked past it 3 times before finally going inside, drawn by the sound of children laughing near a fountain. Inside, the ordinariness of it all felt like medicine. A teenager sat on a bench, absorbed in his phone. A couple argued gently about which restaurant to choose for lunch. An elderly man fed coins into a massage chair, sighing with relief as it rumbled to life. Victoria bought a coffee from a small cafe, paid in cash, and savored the fact that the barista didn't give her a second glance. She wandered past clothing stores and electronics shops, occasionally stopping to look at window displays. In one store, she picked up a decorative pillow shaped like a cat, squeezed it, smiled, and put it back. Simple things, meaningless things, things that had nothing to do with chord progressions or tempo or the weight of expectation. That's when she heard it. Music. Piano music, specifically. Not recorded music playing over speakers, but the real sound of someone's hands on keys. She followed the sound to the mall's main atrium, where a large crowd had gathered in a loose circle. In the center sat a beautiful grand piano, its black surface gleaming under the overhead lights. A banner hung nearby announcing "Play Me," free piano days at Riverside Mall. Apparently, the mall had set this up as some kind of community event, inviting anyone to sit down and play. A young man was currently at the keys, working his way through what sounded like a pop song. He missed some notes and his timing was off, but he played with enthusiasm. The crowd clapped politely when he finished. A woman went next, playing a simplified version of a classical piece Victoria recognized immediately. It was Beethoven, or at least it was supposed to be. The woman's fingers stumbled over the difficult parts, but she laughed at her mistakes and the crowd loved her for it. Victoria stood at the back of the group, half hidden behind a large planter box filled with fake ferns. She watched person after person approach the piano. Some were clearly experienced players showing off a bit. Others were absolute beginners hunting for keys and giggling nervously. Every single one of them looked happy. They played for the pure joy of it, for the simple pleasure of making sound with no thought of perfection or performance reviews, or what critics might say. When was the last time she'd felt that way? She'd been 4 years old when her grandmother first showed her middle C. The memory was so vivid she could still smell her grandmother's lavender perfume, still feel the gentle pressure of those aged hands guiding her small fingers to the correct position. Music had been magic back then. Every new song felt like discovering a secret door to another world. Now music was her job, her career, her identity, and somehow in becoming exceptional at it, she'd lost the thing that made it matter in the first place. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the woman approaching her until it was too late. "Would you like to try?" Victoria looked up, startled. A mall employee stood beside her, maybe in her 50s. with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dorothy. She wore the mall's standard uniform and held a clipboard, presumably for people to sign up for a turn at the piano. "Oh, no thank you," Victoria said quickly, pulling her hood up a bit more. "I'm just watching." "Come on, don't be shy," Dorothy said with an encouraging smile. "Everyone's been so lovely about it. Nobody's judging. It's all just for fun. I really shouldn't. Can you play at all, dear?" Victoria hesitated. What was she supposed to say to that? "A little bit? Well then, perfect. We've had people who'd never touched a piano before. You'll be wonderful, I'm sure." Dorothy gestured toward the piano where the current player had just finished. "There's an opening right now." Really, I'm okay just listening, but a few people in the crowd had turned to look at them. An older gentleman with a friendly face called out, "Go on, give it a try." "Don't worry, we're all terrible too." A young mother bouncing a baby on her hip smiled at her. "It's actually really fun. I went earlier and messed up completely, but everyone was so nice about it." Victoria felt trapped. The attention was the opposite of what she wanted, but now refusing would draw even more eyes. She glanced at the piano again. It did look like a decent instrument, probably rented specifically for this event. Dorothy must have sensed her weakening. "Just one song, dear. Something simple. Make an old lady happy, won't you? I love hearing people play." There was something in the woman's expression that reminded Victoria so strongly of her grandmother that her chest tightened. Her grandmother had been gone for 3 years now, and Victoria hadn't been able to make it home for the funeral because she'd been performing in Sydney. She'd played a concert the same day her grandmother was buried, and she'd never quite forgiven herself for that. "All right," Victoria heard herself say. "Just one song." Dorothy's face lit up. "Wonderful. Right this way, dear." The crowd parted as Victoria walked toward the piano, her heart pounding in a way it never did before sold-out performances in famous concert halls. This felt more real somehow, more vulnerable. She could still leave. She could make up an excuse, say she suddenly didn't feel well, but her feet kept moving forward until she stood beside the bench. She sat down slowly the way she always did, and adjusted the bench to the right height. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the keys. The piano was in decent tune, she noticed. Not perfect, but good enough. The crowd waited. Dorothy stood off to the side, clipboard tucked under her arm, watching with that grandmother smile. Victoria took a deep breath and closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them again, something had shifted inside her. She wasn't sure what she was going to play. She wasn't sure of anything except that in this moment, in this mall with these strangers, she had a chance to remember what music used to feel like. Her fingers found the keys, and she began to play. The keys felt cool under Victoria's fingertips. She sat there for a moment, just feeling the weight of them, the slight resistance as she pressed down without making sound. Around her, the mall continued its rhythm. Someone dropped coins into a fountain. A child asked loudly when they could get ice cream. Normal sounds. Beautiful, normal sounds. She should play something simple. That's what everyone expected. Maybe that beginner's piece her grandmother taught her when she was 5, or one of those popular songs that everyone knew. The kind that made people smile and tap their feet. Something safe. Something that wouldn't draw attention. Her fingers moved to the keys for the opening notes of a simple melody. She played 4 notes, then stopped. It felt wrong, like putting on shoes that didn't fit anymore. Victoria's hands lifted from the keys and hovered in the air. The crowd waited patiently. Someone coughed. She could feel Dorothy watching her with those kind grandmother eyes, probably thinking the shy girl was getting nervous. But Victoria wasn't nervous. Not exactly. She was wrestling with something bigger than nerves. For 8 months, she'd played what was scheduled. What was expected? What critics wanted to hear and audiences paid to see. Every note had been planned weeks in advance. Every concert had been the same precise perfection, night after night, city after city. When had she last played something just because she wanted to? When had she last let her hands decide where to go instead of following someone else's plan? Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Music isn't something you do, little bird. It's something you feel. Let it out, don't hold it in." Victoria's hands dropped back to the keys, but this time they found different notes. She started soft, almost whisper quiet, a simple chord progression that could have been anything. The crowd leaned in slightly, trying to hear. She let the notes hang in the air, feeling them, letting them breathe. Then she shifted. Her right hand climbed up the keyboard while her left hand laid down a foundation of deeper notes. The melody began to take shape, growing from those quiet beginnings into something richer. She recognized what she was playing now. Rachmaninoff, Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most demanding pieces in classical music. The piece she'd been scheduled to perform next week at Carnegie Hall. But she wasn't playing it the way she'd rehearsed it. She was playing it the way it felt in this moment in this mall with these people. Slower in some places, faster in others. Adding small flourishes that weren't in the sheet music. Playing it the way her hands wanted to play it, not the way conductors and music directors had instructed her to play it. The music began to fill the atrium. Not just sound, but presence, energy. The kind of music that made people stop whatever they were doing and listen, and they did stop. The teenager on his phone looked up. The arguing couple fell silent. The elderly man in the massage chair opened his eyes. One by one, people throughout the mall began turning toward the sound. Shopping bags were set down. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Even the store music seemed to fade away, as if the whole building was making room for what was happening at that piano. Victoria's fingers flew across the keys now, building momentum. This was the part where Rachmaninoff demanded everything from the pianist. Speed, precision, power, and somehow also delicacy. The notes cascaded like water falling over rocks, each one crisp and clear but flowing together into something larger than individual sounds. Her eyes were closed now. She didn't need to see the keys. Her hands knew where to go. They'd played this piece 1,000 times, but never like this. Never with this feeling of freedom. Never with the sense that she was playing for herself first and everyone else second. The crowd around the piano had grown. People who'd been walking past stopped in their tracks. Store employees stepped out from behind counters to see where the music was coming from. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders for a better view. Someone near the back stood on a bench. Nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to break the spell. Victoria moved into the second movement where the music became softer, more melancholy. This was the part that always made her think of her grandmother. The part that felt like memory and loss and love all tangled together. Her grandmother had played this movement for her once, years ago, when Victoria was struggling with a difficult period in her training. "Listen," her grandmother had said. "Hear how it's sad but also hopeful? That's life, little bird. That's everything." Tears began sliding down Victoria's face, but she didn't stop playing. Couldn't stop. The music was pouring out of her like it had been locked up for too long and finally found a way out. Every doubt she'd felt, every moment of exhaustion, every time she'd wondered if she'd made the right choices in her life, all of it went into the notes. The crowd felt it too. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others had tears in their eyes. A young woman near the front had her phone out recording, but her hands were shaking so much the video would probably be unwatchable. Victoria reached the third movement. This was where Rachmaninoff exploded into triumph, where all that sadness and struggle transformed into something powerful and alive. Her whole body moved with the music now. Her shoulders swayed. Her head nodded with the rhythm. She wasn't just playing the piano. She was inside the music, swimming in it, breathing it. The technical difficulty of what she was doing was extraordinary. Her fingers moved so fast they blurred. She was hitting notes that most pianists spent months learning to reach consistently. But it didn't look like effort. It looked like flying. Like something that was supposed to happen exactly this way. The crowd had swelled to easily over 100 people now. They packed around the piano in tight circles with more people constantly arriving. Security guards who'd come to check on the growing crowd forgot why they were there and stayed to listen. A janitor leaned on his mop, completely still. 2 police officers on routine patrol stood at the edge of the crowd. Their radios crackling quietly, ignored. Dorothy, the kind mall employee who'd encouraged Victoria to play, had tears streaming down her face. She'd worked at this mall for 12 years. She'd heard hundreds of people play this piano over the past week, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for this. In the cafe where Victoria had bought her coffee earlier, the barista turned down the music playing over the speakers. The sound from the atrium was clear enough that customers could hear it perfectly. One woman set down her cappuccino and just listened, her eyes closed. A businessman in an expensive suit stopped typing on his laptop. He'd been in the middle of an important email, but suddenly it didn't seem important at all. Victoria built toward the finale. This was the moment where everything came together. All the sadness, all the joy, all the technical brilliance and emotional depth. Rachmaninoff had designed this ending to leave audiences breathless. And Victoria played it with everything she had. Her hands crashed down on the final chords with perfect precision and overwhelming power. The last notes rang out through the atrium, echoing off the glass ceiling, filling every corner of the space. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Victoria's hands remained on the keys, trembling. Her chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. Sweat had soaked through her hoodie. Her face was wet with tears. She felt exhausted and alive and more herself than she'd felt in months. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the mall exploded with sound. The applause started like thunder and didn't stop. It rolled through the atrium in waves, growing louder with each second. People weren't just clapping. They were cheering, shouting, whistling. Some were jumping up and down. Others had their hands raised in the air, applauding so hard their palms must have hurt. Victoria slowly lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. They were still shaking. She stared at them like they belonged to someone else. Had she really just done that? Had she really played Rachmaninoff in a shopping mall while wearing a coffee-stained hoodie? She stood up from the bench, her legs unsteady. The crowd's noise grew even louder. She turned to face them, and the full reality of what she'd done hit her all at once. There were so many people. The crowd stretched back through the atrium, spilling into the corridors leading to different parts of the mall. Hundreds of faces, all looking at her with expressions of amazement, joy, and disbelief. Victoria gave a small, awkward bow. She wasn't sure what else to do. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to play something simple, smile politely, and disappear back into the crowd. Instead, she'd just delivered a performance that belonged on a concert stage. "Oh my God," someone near the front shouted. "That was incredible." "Who are you?" another voice called out. "Play something else," a teenager yelled. The crowd pressed closer. Victoria took a step back, suddenly feeling trapped. Dorothy appeared at her side, her face glowing with emotion. "Dear, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. Where did you learn to play like that?" Before Victoria could answer, more people surrounded them. A man in a business suit pushed forward, holding out his phone. "Can I get a picture with you? My daughter takes piano lessons and she'll never believe this." "What's your name?" someone asked. "Are you a professional? Do you teach lessons?" The questions came from every direction. Victoria's carefully constructed anonymity was crumbling. She pulled her hood up higher, but it was useless. Too many people had seen her face. Too many phones had been recording. An older gentleman with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses had worked his way to the front of the crowd. He was staring at Victoria with a strange expression, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. His eyes moved from her face to her hands and back again. Then his mouth dropped open. "Wait," he said loudly enough that people around him turned to look. "Wait, I know you." Victoria's stomach dropped. "You're Victoria Chen," the man said, his voice rising with excitement. "You're Victoria Chen, the pianist." For a moment, nobody reacted. The name didn't mean anything to most of the crowd. They'd stopped to hear beautiful music, not because they recognized a celebrity. But the man kept talking, pulling out his phone with trembling fingers. "My wife and I saw you perform in Boston 2 years ago. We paid $300 for tickets. You played at Symphony Hall. I have the program at home." He turned his phone screen to show the people next to him. It was a concert poster with Victoria's face on it. Her hair styled perfectly, wearing an elegant black gown, looking nothing like the person standing in front of them now. But slowly, recognition began to spread through the crowd like ripples in water. "Oh my God. He's right," a woman said, squinting at her own phone. "Victoria Chen, she's famous. Like, really famous." "She played at Carnegie Hall last year," someone else added, reading from their screen. "It says here her concerts sell out in minutes. She's won awards. Look, there's like a whole Wikipedia page." The energy in the crowd shifted. What had been simple appreciation for beautiful music became something else. Excitement. Amazement. The realization that they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Not just because the music was beautiful, but because someone incredibly famous had been standing right there, disguised in regular clothes, playing in a shopping mall. "Can I get your autograph?" a young woman asked, pushing forward with a shopping receipt and a pen. My daughter studies piano, another mother said, holding up her phone to take a picture. Can you just wave at the camera? She's going to lose her mind. Why are you here? Someone shouted. Do you live in the city? Are you performing somewhere nearby? Is this some kind of publicity stunt? Victoria felt the walls closing in. This was exactly what she'd been trying to escape. The attention, the questions, the feeling of being a thing people wanted to capture on their phones rather than a person who just wanted to play music. Security guards were pushing through the crowd now, trying to create some space. One of them, a tall man with kind eyes and a name tag that read Robert, reached Victoria's side. Miss, do you need help getting out of here? Before Victoria could answer, a young girl squeezed through the crowd. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old with pigtails and a backpack covered in cartoon characters. She looked up at Victoria with wide eyes. That was so pretty, the little girl said softly. I take piano lessons, but I'm not very good yet. My teacher says I have to practice more. Do you practice a lot? The simple, honest question cut through all the chaos. Victoria knelt down to be at eye level with the girl. I do practice a lot, she said quietly. But you know what? The most important thing isn't being good. It's loving what you do. Do you love it? The girl nodded seriously. Sometimes. It's hard, but I like how it sounds when I get it right. That's perfect, Victoria said, and she meant it. That's exactly how it should feel. The girl smiled, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Can you sign this? It's my practice sheet, but I don't think my teacher will mind. Victoria took the paper and the girl's pencil and wrote, Keep playing. Keep loving it. Victoria. By now, someone had called the local news. A reporter was already on the way. People in the crowd were posting videos to social media, typing frantically about what they'd just witnessed. The posts were spreading fast, being shared and reshared. Within minutes, thousands of people knew that Victoria Chen had played an impromptu concert at Riverside Mall. Dorothy stood nearby, looking worried. I'm so sorry, dear. I had no idea who you were. I didn't mean to put you in this position. Victoria stood up from talking to the little girl and looked at Dorothy. Then she looked at the crowd, at all those faces showing every emotion from joy to excitement to simple appreciation. She thought about how the music had felt, pouring out of her without restriction or schedule or expectation. She thought about the little girl with the practice sheet who just wanted to get better at something she loved. It's okay, Victoria said, and realized she meant it. Actually, it's more than okay. Robert, the security guard, touched her elbow gently. Miss Chen, the crowd's getting pretty big. We should probably get you somewhere safer. Is there a back exit you'd like to use? Victoria looked at the piano sitting there in the middle of the atrium. She looked at the crowd, which had grown to several hundred people now. She thought about her hotel room, quiet and empty, waiting for her. She thought about her schedule, packed with rehearsals and interviews and performances that all felt the same. Then she thought about how alive she'd felt while playing, how right it had felt to let the music be what it wanted to be instead of what it was supposed to be. Actually, Victoria said, surprising herself, I'd like to play one more song. If that's okay. The security guard looked uncertain. The crowd's getting pretty large. I'm not sure that's safe. Please, Victoria said. Just one more. Something short. Dorothy's face lit up. Oh, would you? That would be wonderful. The crowd had heard her. The noise level dropped as people realized she might play again. She's going to play another one, someone shouted. The information spread quickly, and even more people came running from different parts of the mall. Robert spoke into his radio, coordinating with other security guards to manage the crowd. After a moment, he nodded. Okay, one more song. But then we really do need to get you out of here safely. Victoria walked back to the piano bench and sat down. The crowd fell completely silent, hardly daring to breathe. Phones were raised, ready to record. But Victoria didn't care about the phones anymore. She didn't care that people knew who she was or that this would probably be all over the news by tonight. She cared about the music, about the way it felt to play from her heart instead of from a schedule, about that little girl with the practice sheet, who needed to know that loving music mattered more than being perfect at it. Victoria placed her hands on the keys and began to play something completely different, something her grandmother had taught her when she was small, a simple, beautiful melody that anyone could understand. The kind of music that made you think of home and comfort and the people you loved. As she played, the whole mall seemed to hold its breath once more. The melody that flowed from Victoria's fingers was different from the Rachmaninoff. Where that had been powerful and demanding, this was gentle, sweet, the kind of music that felt like a warm blanket on a cold day. Her grandmother had called it the Songbird's Lullaby, though Victoria had never found it in any official music books. It was possible her grandmother had made it up, or learned it from her own grandmother. Either way, it belonged to their family, to their story. The crowd swayed slightly as they listened. Parents pulled their children closer. Couples held hands. Even the stressed businessman who'd been rushing to a meeting found himself rooted to the spot, his briefcase forgotten at his feet. The music wasn't showing off technical skill or trying to impress anyone. It was just honest, real, beautiful in its simplicity. Victoria played with her eyes closed, seeing her grandmother's living room, the old upright piano with the sticky E key, the afternoon light coming through lace curtains, the smell of jasmine tea, her grandmother's hands wrinkled and spotted with age, guiding her small fingers across the keys. Music is a gift, little bird, her grandmother would say. Not something you keep for yourself. You give it away and somehow you end up with more than you started with. At the time, Victoria hadn't understood what that meant. She'd been focused on getting into the best music schools, winning competitions, building a career. Success had been measured in awards and ticket sales and critical reviews. But somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten the most important part. Music wasn't about her. It was about connection, about giving something to others that they couldn't quite name but desperately needed. As she played the final notes of the lullaby, letting them fade softly into silence, Victoria opened her eyes. The crowd stood motionless for a moment, caught in the spell of the music. Then the applause came again, but different this time, softer, more reverent, the kind of applause that said thank you rather than, that was impressive. Victoria stood from the bench, and this time she smiled at the crowd. A real smile. Not the practiced one she gave at the end of concerts, but something genuine that came from deep inside her chest where the music lived. Thank you all for listening, she said, her voice barely carrying over the crowd, and thank you for letting me remember why I fell in love with music in the first place. The crowd erupted again, but Robert, the security guard, was already gently guiding her away from the piano. Two other guards had created a path through the people. As Victoria walked, hands reached out to touch her shoulder, her arm, just wanting to make contact with someone who'd given them such an unexpected gift. Thank you, people kept saying. That was amazing. You made my whole week. I'll never forget this. Victoria tried to acknowledge as many as she could, meeting their eyes, nodding, occasionally stopping to shake a hand or accept a quick hug. The little girl with the piano lessons waved frantically from her mother's arms, and Victoria waved back, making the girl squeal with delight. They reached a service corridor behind the stores, and Robert closed the door, muffling the sounds of the crowd. Victoria leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Her hands were shaking again. Her heart was racing. But underneath the physical exhaustion was something else, something that felt like waking up after a very long sleep. That was something else, Robert said, shaking his head with a smile. I've worked here for 6 years and I've never seen anything like that. You're really famous, huh? I guess so, Victoria said. Though I didn't feel famous out there. I just felt like someone playing piano. Well, you made a lot of people happy today. Robert's radio crackled and he listened to a voice on the other end. His expression changed. Miss Chen? Apparently there's a news crew at the main entrance, and your manager is on the phone with mall management. She sounds pretty upset. Victoria closed her eyes. Of course. Of course her manager had already found out. Someone had probably tagged her in a social media post, or maybe a fan had called her office directly. Her manager, Patricia, had very specific ideas about when and where Victoria should perform. A shopping mall on a Tuesday afternoon was definitely not part of the plan. I should probably call her, Victoria said, pulling out her phone from her hoodie pocket. She had 17 missed calls from Patricia, along with dozens of text messages in all caps. The most recent one simply said, "Call me right now." Victoria dialed. Patricia picked up before the first ring finished. "Victoria, what on earth were you thinking?" Patricia's voice was sharp with panic and anger. "You were supposed to go straight to the hotel. You have rehearsal tomorrow morning, and now you're trending on Twitter because you decided to play a concert in a mall? Do you know how many people are posting videos right now? This is completely unprofessional and off-brand, and I have reporters calling me every 30 seconds wanting a statement. Victoria let her manager's words wash over her without really absorbing them. She'd heard versions of this speech before. Everything was always about the brand, the image, the carefully managed career trajectory. Usually she apologized and did whatever Patricia wanted. But today something had shifted. "Patricia," Victoria said calmly, interrupting the stream of criticism. "I played 2 songs. That's all, and it felt more right than anything I've done in months." "More right?" "Victoria, you have a concert at Carnegie Hall in 5 days. You have responsibilities, commitments, people who've paid enormous amounts of money to see you perform in appropriate venues, not shopping malls." "I know." "Then why would you do this? Why would you risk your voice, your energy, your focus on something so random and unplanned?" Victoria thought about the question. Why had she done it? It would have been so easy to say no to Dorothy, to walk away from the piano, to keep her anonymity intact. Instead, she'd played her heart out in front of strangers and felt more alive than she had in years. "Because I needed to remember," Victoria said quietly. "I needed to remember that music is supposed to feel good. That playing isn't just about technical perfection or what critics think. I needed to remember why I started doing this in the first place." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Patricia sighed, a long, tired sound. "Victoria, I understand you're exhausted. The tour has been brutal, I know. But you can't just go off script like this. There are consequences. The news crews are already spinning this as some kind of publicity stunt. Your fans are confused. And the artistic director at Carnegie Hall just called me asking if everything is all right with you. Tell him everything is fine. Better than fine, actually. How can you say that? You're standing in a shopping mall in ratty clothes, having just performed without any advance notice, planning, or security measures. That's not fine, Victoria. That's concerning." Robert caught Victoria's eye and pointed to his watch, then gestured down the corridor. They needed to move. The crowd was apparently trying to find their way into the service areas. "Patricia, I need to go," Victoria said. "Security is getting me out of here." "I'll call you from the hotel." "Victoria, wait. We need to discuss how to handle this. I'm thinking we issue a statement saying it was a spontaneous act of gratitude to your fans, something about giving back to the community. We can spin this positively if we act fast." "Sure, whatever you think is best." Victoria was barely listening now. Robert had opened a door to the parking garage and was motioning for her to follow. "Are you even listening to me?" "I'll call you later, Patricia. I promise." Victoria hung up before her manager could respond. She knew she'd pay for that later, but right now she just needed air and space and time to think. Robert led her through the parking garage to a side exit that opened onto a quiet street behind the mall. The afternoon sun was lower now, painting everything in golden light. Victoria could hear the muffled sounds of the crowd inside, but out here it was peaceful. "There's a cafe about 2 blocks down," Robert said. "Small place, usually pretty empty this time of day. You could probably hide out there until things calm down." "Thank you," Victoria said. "For everything." "For keeping me safe in there," Robert smiled. "Thank you for the music. My mom died last year, and that second song you played, the quiet one, it reminded me of her somehow. So thank you for that." He walked back inside, leaving Victoria alone on the sidewalk. She looked up at the sky, at the clouds moving slowly overhead. Her phone buzzed constantly in her pocket with notifications, messages, calls. But she didn't reach for it. Instead, she started walking. Not toward the hotel where her schedule and responsibilities waited. Not toward the cafe Robert had suggested. Just walking with no destination in mind, enjoying the feeling of being nobody again for just a little while longer. Because tomorrow, everything would change. The videos would go viral. The news would spread. Everyone would want to know why the famous Victoria Chen had played piano in a shopping mall. There would be interviews and explanations and all the complicated machinery of public relations spinning into gear. But today, right now, she had played music because she wanted to. She had connected with strangers through sound. She had remembered what it felt like to give music away as a gift instead of a transaction. And somehow, that felt like the most important performance of her entire career. By the time Victoria reached her hotel, the videos had already been viewed millions of times. She sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through her phone in disbelief. The footage wasn't great quality, most of it shaky and taken from different angles in the crowd. But somehow that made it better, more real, more honest. The comments flooded in by the thousands. People from all over the world were watching a famous pianist play in a shopping mall, and they were crying, sharing their own stories, talking about what music meant to them. I lost my sister last month, and this made me cry for the first time since her funeral. Thank you. I quit piano lessons when I was 12 because I wasn't good enough. After watching this, I think I want to try again. My daughter has autism and rarely responds to anything, but she stopped what she was doing and listened to the entire video. She asked me to play it 3 more times. I was having the worst day of my life, and somehow this video found me. I don't know how to explain it, but it helped. Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she read comment after comment. These weren't people critiquing her technique or comparing her performance to other recordings. They were talking about how the music made them feel, what it gave them, how it changed their day, their week, their perspective on things. This was what her grandmother had meant. You give music away and somehow you end up with more than you started with. Her phone rang. Patricia again. Victoria almost didn't answer, but she knew she couldn't avoid her manager forever. She took a deep breath and picked up. Before you say anything, Victoria started, I know you're upset, and I know this wasn't planned, but I'm not sorry I did it. There was a pause. Then Patricia spoke, and her voice was different, softer. Victoria, have you seen the numbers? What numbers? The views, the shares, the engagement. It's enormous. Bigger than anything we could have planned or paid for. The video from the mall has been viewed 15 million times in the last 3 hours. 15 million. Major news networks are covering it. Good Morning America wants you on tomorrow. The Tonight Show is asking if you can come on next week. Victoria sat up straighter. I don't understand. I thought you said this was a disaster. I thought it was, Patricia admitted. But I was wrong. Victoria, people are calling this the most authentic moment they've seen from a classical musician in years. They're saying you've made classical music accessible, relevant, human. The Carnegie Hall performance sold out the remaining tickets in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. And now we have venues calling from around the world wanting to book you. Victoria felt dizzy. That's not why I did it, I know. And I think that's exactly why it worked. Patricia's voice grew thoughtful. I've been managing your career for 8 years, and I've always focused on prestige, traditional venues, maintaining a certain image. But what you did today, in that mall, reached more people than 100 concert halls ever could. You reminded everyone, including me, that music is supposed to be about connection, not exclusivity. Victoria walked to the window and looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the evening darkness. So what happens now? Well, that depends on you, Patricia said. We could go back to business as usual. Keep doing the tours, the concert halls, the scheduled performances, or... She paused. Or we could try something different. Different how? What if we did more performances like today? Not all the time, but sometimes. Pop-up concerts in unexpected places. Parks, subway stations, community centers. Places where people who'd never buy a ticket to Carnegie Hall could hear you play. We could stream them online, make them free, and reach millions of people. It would be completely unprecedented for a classical musician at your level. Victoria's heart started beating faster. You'd really be okay with that? It goes against everything you've always told me about maintaining prestige and exclusivity. Today taught me something, Patricia said quietly. I watched those videos, Victoria. I saw people's faces. I read the comments. And I realized I've been so focused on building your career that I forgot why people need music in the first place. It's not about fancy venues or expensive tickets. It's about touching people's hearts. You did that today. You reminded me what really matters. After they hung up, Victoria sat in the quiet hotel room for a long time thinking. Her whole life had been built around structure, planning, and tradition. The path to success in classical music was well defined. Prestigious schools, important competitions, famous venues, critical acclaim. She'd followed that path perfectly and ended up exhausted and disconnected from the thing she loved most. But today, in that mall, she'd stepped off the path, and instead of falling, she'd flown. 3 months later, Victoria stood in a subway station in Brooklyn at 8 in the morning. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Next to her sat a portable keyboard, nothing fancy, just a decent instrument that could handle being moved around. A small sign next to her read, "Free concert. Stay if you'd like. Rush if you need to. Either way, have a beautiful day. The morning commuters rushed past, most of them too focused on getting to work to notice. But a few people slowed down, then stopped. As Victoria began to play, a small crowd gathered. People who'd been running late suddenly decided they had a few extra minutes. Others pulled out their phones not to record but to text their friends. You have to see this. She played for 45 minutes. Some people stayed the whole time. Others listened for just one song before rushing off to catch their train. A construction worker sat on the ground with his lunchbox, tears running down his weathered face. A group of teenagers on their way to school stood in a circle, swaying to the music. An elderly woman closed her eyes and conducted with her finger, mouthing the notes. When Victoria finished, the crowd applauded. A few people dropped money in the keyboard case even though the sign said free. A young man approached her nervously. I just wanted to say thank you. I was on my way to quit my job today. I've been miserable for months. But listening to you play reminded me that beautiful things still exist in the world. I think maybe I'll give it one more week. Victoria smiled at him. I hope things get better for you. They already are. Today started better than I expected. Over the next 6 months, Victoria performed in subway stations, parks, community centers, and yes, even a few more shopping malls. She still did her scheduled concerts at famous venues, but now those felt different too. They felt like part of a larger conversation rather than the only conversation. The videos from her surprise performances continued to go viral. Classical music stations played them constantly. Young people who'd never listened to classical music before discovered it through her pop-up concerts. Piano sales increased. Music schools reported a surge in new students. But Victoria's favorite moment came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in a park. She'd been playing for about 20 minutes when she noticed a familiar face in the small crowd. It was the little girl from the mall, the one with the practice sheet and the cartoon backpack. She was with her mother, and when she saw Victoria looking at her whole face lit up. After the performance, the girl ran up to her. I've been practicing every day, she announced proudly. My teacher says I'm getting really good. I want to be like you someday. Victoria knelt down to her level. You know what? You already are like me. Because you love music and you practice and you keep trying even when it's hard. That's what makes someone a real musician. Not fame or fancy concerts. Just love and dedication. The girl hugged her, then ran back to her mother, chattering excitedly about everything she'd been learning. Victoria packed up her keyboard as the park slowly emptied. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She thought about her grandmother, about that living room with the lace curtains and the jasmine tea, about being a little girl who discovered that pressing keys could create magic. Her phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. London Symphony wants to partner with us on a series of free outdoor concerts next summer. Interested? Victoria typed back, absolutely. She picked up her keyboard case and started walking. Tomorrow she had a rehearsal at Lincoln Center. Next week she was playing at a community center in Chicago. The month after that, a pop-up concert at a farmer's market in Seattle. Her career had become something she'd never planned, but somehow always needed. A mixture of tradition and spontaneity, prestige and accessibility, structure and freedom. She performed in concert halls for people who loved classical music, and in subway stations for people who'd never heard it before. Both mattered. Both were real. That day in the mall when Dorothy had asked her to play, Victoria had been trying to escape from something. But what she'd actually done was find her way back to it. Back to the pure, simple truth that her grandmother had taught her all those years ago. Music is a gift. You give it away and somehow you end up with more than you started with. As Victoria walked through the park toward the subway station, she passed a street musician playing guitar. She stopped, listened for a moment, then dropped some money in his case and smiled at him. He nodded back, and they shared that understanding that only musicians have, the knowledge that they were part of something bigger than themselves, something that connected strangers and healed hearts and reminded people that beauty still existed in the world. Victoria descended into the subway station, blending into the crowd of evening commuters heading home after long days. Nobody recognized her. Nobody asked for autographs or pictures. She was just another person in the city, carrying a keyboard case, humming softly to herself. And she had never felt more like exactly who she was supposed to be.